Welcome, everyone, to our 7th annual National Girlfriends Networking Day. Thank you all for joining us. So today is a day of networking and connections and empowerment and sisterhood with events around the country. We have thousands of women participating. I'm going to read off some of the new places that we're in this year. Kansas City, which has an event with 250 women. Yes. Hi, Kansas City. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Billings, Montana, Seattle, Washington, Bermuda. Wow. I'd like to be there. So just in terms of this event, Jeanette was on our first panel in 2012 when we had a small room of 20 people and 100 people total participating in National Girlfriends Networking Day. We've now grown it to each year have 40 to 50 locations around the country and thousands of women participating. And the pride of our organization and what we fermented as an organization is inclusiveness. And in times like this, where there's so much divisiveness in the country, I'm really heartened that we can have an event where everyone can feel part of what we do as an organization and feel comfortable here. And I'm proud of how we've grown and the nature of all you young ladies who come to our events and feel connected and come back every year. Once you come to one of our events, you are part of our sisterhood, part of National Girlfriends Networking Day. We want you to come back every year. You're going to meet somebody here today that is going to change your life in some remarkable way. And you might not know it right away, but in some way you're going to interact with somebody and they're going to reconnect somebody that they know and say, I met this great woman at an event and you should hire her. Or I need to hire somebody and I met this great young woman and she knows people from her school. So this is how the world works, and we're so glad that you are here to be with us today and this wonderful panel. So I want to just comment as well as somebody who for the last decade has run a national women's organization, and women's rights generally tend to be very slow and linear in their progress. But then something really exciting has happened since we were together last, and that is the Me Too movement, which is like nothing I have ever seen. It's like, a bonfire blowing for women's rights. It's a very exciting time, especially for you young women, that you get to be part of this and see this tremendous change that's happening all over our country, that women can find their voices. And that's a central part of what we're going to talk about today, that things maybe didn't go perfectly for the four of us, and that life, is going to hand you some bumps. And we are going to be very real about some things that we've encountered that you might want to, that you might go through, or you might go through something completely different. But the thing is, we're all in this together. And that's part of this whole Me Too movement, that we all are joining together, and that if women had each other's back, everything else would take care of itself. So for those of you who aren't in New York, this is how we're going to be connected. NGN Day with the hashtag on Twitter. And last year we had 14 million Twitter views, and we trended on Twitter. And I would like us to be competitive and beat that 14 million. So if you're in a room somewhere around the country, please tweet pictures of your room, what it looks like, what you're seeing there. We're also going to take questions from all of the remote locations. So if you have a question and you're not sitting here in New York, put a Q and a colon and write your question, and we're going to ask those of the panelists. If you hear some wisdom and advice that you think others who are not at one of these events would benefit from one of the panelists, tweet that too. But that's another way that we can all feel connected of what's happening at all the different events. So welcome. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. You have in your seats or in your remote locations a bio of each panelist. But they're going to tell you a little bit about their journey as we open up the event. So Rose, hand it to you first.
Thank you, Amy. It's amazing to be here with all of you and these great panelists. And I guess I just want to say, I am the product of Italian immigrants. My grandfather came here with a 4th grade education. So if there's any question about whether people with a 4th grade education are worthy immigrants, his granddaughter is the CEO of one of the biggest outdoor apparel companies in the world. It burns me when people say that stuff. Yeah, so I guess what I want to say just about my own personal journey is that nothing worked out the way I thought it would. And I think the most important thing for me has really been just about focusing in on what it is I want and spending time, which I did from the time I was really young, just writing down goals. What do I want to accomplish? In 5 years, I want to be here. And I'd put down some really audacious goals, and then I'd look back and I'd see that I met most of them. So I think, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about myself because, you guys are so much smarter than I am. You have so much more at your fingertips, You have so much information at your fingertips now. Like we didn't have that when we were, being activists or, it was a totally different world. And I guess I just want to say that informed my life, my activism, my protection of people and the planet, trying to find that in my work. And I had to do that through sort of a very circuitous route of being in places that I didn't like being and deciding I don't want to be here anymore. And moving on, I took a kind of normal path in terms of business, but and came up through the finance area. But I don't know. I just want to say that you guys have a lot more information at your fingertips, and you have a lot more that you can do in terms of work and activism. And I hope you do it because we need it right now.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. I'm also the CEO of Patagonia. Very successful. I'm a comedian. It's barely a job. It's no one here should try to do it. It's a horrible life. What I can say that is helpful about my journey is I was that kid who would watch TV. And my parents were like, oh, you love the practice. Do you want to be a lawyer when you grow up? I was like, no, I want to pretend to be one on TV. I never wanted to be anything other than on TV. But I didn't see anyone when I was a kid who looked like me who was doing that thing because there weren't any. And so I told myself that I couldn't do it. And I delayed for a really long time. I went to college as a theater major. And I was always like, there's 4 really good parts in the play. I was always getting the 5th part. I was always good enough. She'll definitely show up to rehearsal on time. I was always that girl. And so I was like, no one who looks like me has succeeded at this. I'm not great at it. I'm just good enough at it. So I chose to go to grad school instead of trying to do my dream. That was a mistake. Any decision I think that you make out of fear is it's not going to work out. It didn't work out for me. I went to one of the best grad schools and one of the best countries in the program in the country, and I was so miserable, and I hated it. And eventually started doing comedy on the side and found my voice and found that this is what I'm actually meant to do. And I was this is whatever, it's Girlfriend's Day. I'm going to be real. I'm really smart, and I was really good at grad school. But I didn't enjoy doing it. It wasn't for me. And I found comedy, and it was this is for me. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. So I found my voice. I switched to comedy. No one should do comedy, but I'm saying whatever your thing is, even if the world is telling you you can't do it, don't also tell yourself that. That was my mistake. There wasn't anyone who looked like me who was succeeding at that time, but I chose to tell myself that I couldn't do it. And so that's the applicable advice to other people.
Well, Are you also the CEO of Patagonia? I wish I was the CEO of Patagonia. I wish I was as funny as she is. So I'm a physician, and I knew I wanted to be a physician since I have memory. So unlike other people that go through different paths, etc., I also had very clear goals. So I would have to echo that. And for physicians, the path is very set. There are certain things you need to do to get there. So I was very clear about that. But I have to say that I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. And coming to college for the first time when I was 17 was very difficult. Not knowing the language, etc., that was a challenge. Not being able to do my bio homework and read a chapter in one evening. That would take me probably 2 days to do rather than 2 hours. So it was challenging. And I think what I learned in college was that you have to ask for help. And there's so many people that want to help you that I hope that in your path, you actually tap into those mentors or those people that you're working with to help you succeed. Because I think, again, that's what we're trying to do. Like that networking and that support, it's going to come from your girlfriends. And I certainly had that in college. I wouldn't be there without that support.
It works.
It works.
It definitely works.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask the panelists one question, and then we're going to start to take some questions before we go back to my pre-planned questions. And again, if you're at one of our remote locations and you want to tweet us a question, just do a giant Q and make sure you use the hashtag NGNDay, and we'll take your questions. So the first question is, what do you wish you knew at 22? And I'm going to throw something out there that has really occurred to me because I do have 2 children, one of whom started a job today and couldn't be here, my daughter who's been here for a number of years. And I wish I knew that no matter how I chose the work-life balance, it was all going to work out. Because I feel like that there is so much pressure, and that every woman I know, I'm 52 now, feels like she didn't do it the right way. And there is no right answer. I feel like I did it the right way. And that's what you all have to say to yourself, that there's no perfect solution. And if I could wish anything for the young women in this room, that you would let go of the guilt and just do what felt right and go with it. And for the women my age or in between those ages, to just know that whatever you did your best, and to forgive yourself for whatever guilt our culture has put on you. So with that, what do you wish you knew at 22?
Walk with the confidence of a mediocre white male.
Okay.
What do you think?
There's a lot of pressure here.
And you have to go after Ashley, too.
Well, now she's the CEO of Patagonia. I thought I'd say something funny.
Well, I had jokingly said that I wish I knew that that was the thinnest I was going to be. Like, I think women are like waiting to get beautiful. Just decide that you are. It's so much easier to do that than to like change.
Man, that's a good
Also,
one.
I think that like when you're 22, specifically, like when you just finished college, you think like, oh my God, the next decision I make is going to affect my whole life. And it truly isn't. Like if you make the wrong one, you just get to make another one later. So like you can release a little bit of the pressure of like, I have to choose today what the rest of my life is going to be.
I think going to the balance issue, there's never a good time or a bad time. I think you just have to do what's right at that moment in time and try to balance as best as you can. And what comes to mind, it's not more 22-ish, it's a little older, but having children. I knew I wanted to have a family. And how do you find that balance when you're a fellow, still in training with very little money to pay for childcare? But I decided that that was important in my life, and then you just make it work.
Okay. So we're going to do one more round of questions and then take questions from the audience. So tell us about an unexpected twist or something you didn't anticipate. Do you want to go first? That way you don't have to like worry about these two.
So in my 20s, while I was in college, actually going for my sophomore year, my dad passed away. And that was a big change, having to start filling out financial aid paperwork, trying to figure all those things when you're in your 20s. It's actually quite challenging. So I think that was very difficult for me. Also being away from home, not with that family support, especially when your parent just passed away. So I think my piece of advice is that when you have something like that, either a parent sick or it might be cancer or something really disturbing, to stay focused and again, find a support network to help you with that challenge.
There we go. So this was like, I guess not a twist for me, but for like my family. I was at Northwestern doing a PhD program, and I dropped out of my PhD to start doing comedy, which was very unexpected to everyone else. But to me, I knew I was miserable. So I just like had like finally come to the decision that I was going to do something different. And I think like I had a whole life planned out for myself where I was going to be a professor and an academic and get tenure and never have to worry about a job. And then I switched to the most unstable, like literally the most unstable career that exists. And sort of having to make peace with, like, I believe in myself and I don't need like tenure to feel secure. All I need is what I have inside of me. And I know that like I will figure it out. So yeah, I think like don't be afraid. Whatever job a lot of people who are like 22 are going to have doesn't actually exist yet. So don't like get so caught into a plan of like this is what my life is going to be that you miss this amazing crazy thing off to the side that we don't even know exists yet.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that the thing that was the biggest, not in my plan twist, was, I was striving a lot as a young person because my parents divorced and my mom was financially very insecure because of the divorce. And so we went from having a nice middle class life to being, basically on food stamps and welfare. And so I was always striving to make more money and to get more promotions. And that was kind of the way that I was wired. And I didn't really account for the fact that I was going to be also developing spiritually as a person, and I was studying Buddhism at the time, and I was like, wow, I don't think I want to be doing what I'm doing anymore. And at that point, I had financial security, so I don't know why I was so worried about making a big change, but I made the change and left my work and left the highest paying job I had ever had, and, up until that point, which was a really hard thing to do as a child of an immigrant, as most of you probably know. It's hard to leave high paying jobs. And so I think that was the biggest thing that I've ever done. I did a long retreat. I took some time for myself, which I had not done. I'd been working since I was 15. And I'm really happy that I did that because it put me on the path that I am today. And I wouldn't be the CEO of Patagonia had I not taken that time. And I got so much advice, like, you're right in the middle of your career, you're destroying yourself, why are you doing this? And I didn't listen to any of it because, I don't know, my gut was telling me to do something different. So I think my gut's been right 100% of the time.
Trusting your instinct. Women are terrible at trusting their
yeah,
instinct.
and every time I followed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I want to talk about something unexpected. And my friend Lauren here in the front seat has a saying that people plan and God laughs. And isn't that the truth? I, like probably many of you, had plans in November 2016 for the new agenda and for my life, what would happen next when Hillary won for president. And I think back now, that's almost 2 years ago, at how funny life is as a journey and all the chapters that we have in our lives. And in a circuitous route, some of the plans that I had at that time, which was eventually, as my kids left for college, to write a book, did come true. It's not the book I wanted to write. My book sucks. But it's, life kind of takes you on these twists and turns that you can't account for. And what I have generally found is when you apply yourself to something and you stick with it, the stick with itness will take you to wherever you go. Most of you in this room, and this might not be the case for all the rooms watching, but in this room are young, and you're probably thinking that your career coming out of college or the career you're in is going to be your last act. And I'm here to tell you it's going to be your first act. That for many of us, life has many chapters. And Something that I have learned over time, and age gives wisdom, is to embrace those chapters. And sometimes they're, with each chapter, pleasant, and there's parts that aren't pleasant. I always use the analogy that I love going to the gym, but if I worked at a gym, I would hate going to the gym. So every job has its benefits and its drawbacks. But do things that you love, and when the things that you're doing aren't giving you back what you need anymore. I worked on Wall Street in this building for a number of years, at Morgan Stanley and other places, and doing the Wall Street thing for 2 decades. I loved what I did, but after 2 decades, it felt like a lot of the same thing, and I felt like I needed to do something new. So don't be afraid to take the chance to step back. I, like Rose, took a year off, got involved with something completely different, got involved with something politically, saw how women were mistreated in the media in 2007, 2008. And then when that was done in 2018, 10 years ago, a group of women sat in my room and we started the New Agenda to speak out against the disparate treatment of women in media. So things start small. What you're thinking about today seems like I could never do that. But you can do that if you find something that you really are passionate about and stick with it. And this is important as well. Surround yourself with people that will support your dream. And I think just picking up on something that Ashley said, you have to be your own best advocate and tell yourself that you can do it. So with that, I would love to take some questions. If there's questions in the room, or we also have questions from the remote events. Again, if you have a question that you'd like to pose, just put a Q and then tweet it to hashtag NGN Day. Keep tweeting the wisdom you're hearing. So we're going to start off with a question in New York. Maybe it's like the mic's coming to you.
Hi, I'm Anna Maike, and thank you all for speaking just on your changes and what you tried and what worked. Is there something that you've tried that failed completely? And if yes, what lessons did you learn from it, and how did you get beyond that to the next step?
Who wants to take that?
I have one. So I studied comedy at the Second City, and they have their, it's one of the most successful, like, long-running comedy shows in the world, and they have this very particular style that, like, really works, and it's, like, really shiny and happy, and you come out, it's like, hi, I'm Ashley, welcome to the Second City. And I'm, not that person.
No?
And I can't even convincingly pretend to be. But I tried for a really long time. I was there for many years, and I just tried so hard to be their thing and utterly failed at it. I worked on a cruise ship for them. I never got cast in any of their big shows, and I just kept spinning my wheels, being like, why can't I be on main stage of Second City? Why can't I be on main stage of Second City?
You were on cruise ships?
I was on a cruise ship.
Wow.
Can you imagine going on a cruise and like this is what shows up? So are we all sad to be here? It wasn't for me. But I learned a lot there, and eventually I had to learn that, like, I'm not the person for this, and I need to go elsewhere. And I think that when something is telling you no, when you're not getting that promotion, you're not getting that thing, there's a, like, sick little part of us that wants it more. It's like when you have a bad boyfriend, and the boyfriend's like, you're kind of ugly, and you're like, I will stay here until you love me. And, like, you're going to do that at some point in your life. It's human nature. But if there's like a little black voice in the back of your mind that remembers this day and is like, Ashley said, leave. When someone tells you they don't want you, leave. Get what you can from the experience. I learned so much at Second City. It was an invaluable experience in my life. But I could have spent the next 20 years there waiting to get Second City main stage and not turned in my packet for the show I'm on now. So it's like, learn what you can and then figure out when it's time to go. Instead of just like staying somewhere until that one thing validates you. Because it may not happen for a million reasons that have nothing to do with you.
I think for those scientists in the room that are applying for grants and even business people applying for funding money, etc., you're going to get a lot of no letters. Sorry, we cannot fund you, etc. And that's tough, because writing a grant or writing a proposal takes a lot of time, a lot of energy and effort. And I would just say that whoever told you no, email them and ask them for feedback, why they told you no. hopefully they'll give you some feedback and then learn from it again. Learn from that experience and keep applying and reapply and try to figure out how to make it better. Just don't give up.
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably the same thing that Ashley talked about. I worked in semiconductor manufacturing for a while, and I was at a high-level finance job, and I was the only woman on the management team. I was the only woman who had staff reporting to her at a high level in the company. And I don't know why I stayed there so long. I stayed there almost 7 years. I mean, I should have left after like 3 years and kind of learned what I could learn. And I regret that I stayed as long as it was all like guys with pocket protectors. And then there was like me. And it was weird, and it was also an advantage, but it was also, like I just never, it didn't feel like my place that I wanted to be. I didn't feel good there. I didn't feel understood there. And I wish I had left sooner. And honestly, I really feel like that's probably the same thing that you're talking about, Ashley. Like just recognizing when you don't belong somewhere and finding where you do belong.
Amen.
Yeah.
I took a job shortly after I was pregnant with my first child, who is now 20. I took a job during actually my maternity care because the job that I had left had kind of not been so great as I was going through my pregnancy. And I went to the first dinner. I was 31, had a newborn, the first managing director's dinner. And it was at the Four Seasons. And I had signed a 2-year contract to go and start a department for them. It was a firm called Wasserstein Perella, which no longer exists. But and I looked around the room, and I was the only woman, which in retrospect, I get to say, I was the first woman managing director at Wasserstein Perella. But I was also the only woman in the room. And it was the only place I worked also on the trading floor other than the people answering the phone that were like sales assistants. I was the only woman. And I had a 2-year contract, but I was miserable. Like I ended up starting with other women on Wall Street what grew to become a group called Damsels in Distress. And because we traded distressed debt. And at the first meeting, there were like 20 of us. And many of us were the only women at our firm at that time. And we just went out drinking and we're playing I Never till 3 a.m. and smoking cigarettes and drinking. And everybody heard about it the next day. And all the guys were like, why didn't I get to go to that? And then the next time it was 40 women because they heard we had such a great time. And then we decided next time we get together, we should all grab a young woman from somewhere we work. And so then it was 100 women. And then eventually it became like corporations were sponsoring it and a lot less fun, so we stopped going. But I actually left before my contract was up because I was so miserable, and I came here. And I had to initially in the first year take a pay cut to do it. But I just knew that it wasn't the place for me. And they did everything they could to keep me. They were lovely. Bruce Wasserstein, when he was alive, one of the biggest mensches I've ever worked for. But if it doesn't work, you got to move on and land somewhere else, even if you have to take a little bit of a step back to take 2 steps forward. So, okay, question, and this is coming from Montana. Little girls, young women are becoming more active earlier. What advice would you give for them to keep on and not give up? Who wants to grab that one?
I'll grab it.
Okay.
I mean, we talk a lot about like the future is female and all that. Well, the future is now. I mean, the present is female. You know what I mean? We are here now. And I think women need to feel more comfortable to just lead and rule, and I think, I noticed this as I was going through my work life, that women were less likely to ask for promotion than men generally, almost 10 to 1. That's not the case at Patagonia because we have gender parity. But
Wow.
yeah, but we have gender parity because we've been providing on-site childcare for 30 years.
Wow.
Yep.
That's why we have
That's-
gender parity. That's it.
Yeah.
Just picture a bunch of little kids in vests.
It's cute. It's really cute, actually.
Anyone want to add anything to that? Poor Jeanette. Anything you want to add?
Well, I take the question slightly from a different point. I do think children and teens should still be involved in what they should be involved, sports, art, music. I almost think that it's great to see activism in the students, but I also think that should be when you're a little older and you're 2 feet, more independent, that maybe parents and adults should be doing some of that, so that kids can be kids. So I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah. I want to add something to that
Yeah.
because the young ladies wearing the New Agenda baseball caps
Yep.
are our Young Women Leadership Council.
Yep.
And every summer I host some of them for a retreat, TREAT, at my home to hear what they're hearing on campus, because we do runs, we're going to talk
Yeah.
about this at the end, on college campuses to raise awareness for campus sexual assault. And as a young woman, and as I speak to college women, I'm really struck by how oppressive parents can be without meaning to be. And what I'm trying to say is telling your daughter, trying to shelter her and having, thinking you're doing the right thing by telling her to ignore things that are happening that are belittling her by the color of her skin, her sexuality, her being a woman, to just not pay attention and fight against those and let it go. And I think even though sometimes as parents we tell that tale feeling as if we're protecting our daughter, what we're doing is actually disempowering our daughters. And I think one of the most important things that we can do, and for the young women here, is to have a voice. Whatever your passion is, find that passion and speak about it and get involved outside of work as part of your work. But never cower away from what is present and what is bothering you or feeling you. That's actually the fuel that might land your career or land your non-for-profit work or how you volunteer your time. Which brings us to the next question that we've been tweeted, which is, how has spirituality impacted your life and or career? You're up.
Yeah, so my dad is a minister.
Wow.
And I say dirty words on TV for a living. But my dad is a minister, and my mom is as well. She's always worked in nonprofit. She worked for USA for Africa and World Vision. Now she works to eradicate homelessness. And it's like kind of funny that I ended up being a comedian, but my dad and I will joke and often say that we have the same job. Like, we both stand in front of a group of people and try to convince them to do better, and we just do it in like very different ways. So to me, growing up really religious just made me grow up with a sense of responsibility of like, you don't just like live here and take care of yourself, but you have been entrusted to be a steward of this whole thing. And it's not enough to just like make sure your life or your family is okay. You have to try to make sure the planet is okay, and you have to like actively work towards it. But, so my belief, God has given us all special skills, and we don't all have the same skills. And Lord knows you would not want me to be your minister. Like, if you were having a bad day and I showed up like, so I have to use the skills that I have, and I think we all have to use whatever skills we have. And I think we get caught in we get caught into religion and forget that like spirituality is what is your responsibility to the rest of the world? What is your relationship with the planet, and how do you express that? And it doesn't have to be the same way your parents do. It just has to be that you are in alignment with your own values.
I'm Catholic, and but for me, religion has been very important. I only go to church probably 3-4 times a year. But working with sick children and seeing their parents struggle with sick children, and as a physician, seeing a child that is sick, I actually find quite a bit of strength in that energy, spirituality, whatever we want to call it, to have some hope. And I see parents asking for that hope when they pray or meditate, etc. So I think, at least in my field, it actually definitely plays a big role on how I approach things and approach caring, taking care of children.
Anything to spirituality?
Well, I mean, I sort of rejected Catholicism, because that's how I was raised, and it just felt so anti, in terms of like the teachings of the church are, teaching, love and compassion is okay, but then when you start like wanting to control my body and what I can do with it, or make some comment about my sexuality, I got a problem then. So I think like rejecting spirituality, that'll only get you along so far, I think, because I ultimately ended up sort of finding a spiritual practice that felt more aligned with who I am as a person. And I think, it's been really about developing more compassion and compassion for others, and compassion for the planet, and compassion that, your experience might not be someone else's experience, and that you should seek to be curious about that and compassionate about it. So that to me is like the golden rule, like treating people how you would want to be treated, no matter who they are. And, so that, I think I've found my way back to a kind of spirituality that I feel is really the right practice for me.
Yeah. And I'll just add, I'm Jewish, and for a number of years when I was in college, became disengaged with religion, got kind of re-engaged when my kids went to nursery school at our local temple. But I've found that religions have a place for me in my life of sort of giving me sort of a balance and a reference point, but they don't inform the spirituality with which I live my life. And as I've gotten older and my circles of friends have changed, one who is here today, Nancy Weiser, who always pushes me to be present and to think of things in a more spiritual way, I'll just share an anecdote of trying to do that in light of the person who has to look at her Twitter feed every day to see what's happening in the news. And that is, we learn to live with stress and learn to live with what we're living in. And in the last couple of months, both of my kids have observed, and a couple of my friends have observed to me, you don't seem stressed out about NGN Day. Usually this time of year, for like the 3 months ahead of NGN Day, I am effing frantic about NGN Day and all the events we have to handle and all the requests that we get around the country. And I mean, my inbox is a mess right now. And it will be until, for another week. For the months ahead of NGN Day, it's a mess. And usually I'm pretty stressed out about it. The day of, like last year, the night before NGN Day, Shep was like barking at a bunny through the window, jumped out through the screen window. I was like screaming, oh my God, what else could go wrong? This year it's like, oh, yeah, NGN Day is coming. Which I learned something from that, which is I'm so focused on other things that have grabbed my attention. And this is one of our biggest years. And you're all here in this room, and we're all doing great things together. That being present and the way we deal with stress is all what we give ourselves permission to do. And so that's the lesson that I have learned in this era. So question, how have you been successful getting men to mentor you? And do you feel that this is necessary?
I think as a mentor, male or female, I think it's based on, it's like in medicine, it's an apprentice relationship. And you have to find a person, male or female, that share those interests with you and that it's going to support you, sponsor you, etc. My mentor for the past 18 years has been a Jewish male. We share our passion for protecting children from child abuse. And so I don't see it as a male-female question. I've also have great female role models and female mentors too, but I wouldn't separate them by their sex. Find somebody that can support you, right?
Yeah, I would say also I've had both male and female mentors, and all of those relationships have been great. And I don't think gender has much to do with it. But part of the question is also like, how do you get them to do it? And I think like sometimes, and you guys probably experience this too, you'll get an email from a stranger and they're like, can you be my mentor? And that's actually not the way to do it.
Yep. Yep.
I think that when you're looking for mentorship, you should look to someone who is within your circle, who you can actually have a one-to-one relationship with. So don't email Oprah and ask her to mentor you. Oprah's busy taking care of Gail. She doesn't have time for you. But there's definitely someone in your circle who is one step or two steps ahead of you who can mentor you now. And then when you get to that point, you're probably going to meet another mentor, but it's going to be someone who's already in your circle and also someone who you have something to offer them. So if you approach someone like a professor or a boss and you're like, hey, I see that you're really busy and maybe you need some help answering your emails. I would love to do that. And then when you have a chance, if we could get coffee and I could talk to you about XYZ, that is such a more attractive offer than like, do you want to mentor me?
Do you want to answer that, or?
I feel like that pretty much covers what I would say.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have a lot of questions to go through. So the next one is, what is one tip for women trying to balance work-personal life? And I'm going to throw in one thing and then pass it to Rose, and that is forgive yourself. Like, for crying out loud, forgive yourself. There is no right answer to work-life balance. Be gentle and kind to yourself, and don't judge yourself. That's where I start that conversation. Now to greater minds.
Yeah. Well, I don't have children, so I feel like I can only half answer this question. But I remember when I became CEO of Patagonia, and I was just stressed and working really, really hard. And I called a mentor, a male mentor that I've known for 20 years, and I said, God, I'm having such a hard time finding any balance. And he said, there is none.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
And in some ways, that was actually kind of good to hear. Like, like there really isn't like some magic balance that you're going to find. I think that you have to take time for yourself, and I meditate every day. That helps me a lot, just to unplug and spend some time reflecting on what you're going to do in the morning and what you've done at night or how you're feeling at night. Even if you just do it for a few minutes quietly to yourself, I find that it's very, very helpful.
I have 3 children. They're teens now. I really had to forgive myself when I was a resident and a fellow, not to have a nanny, sometimes 2. But what I then kind of discovered was that when I go on vacation and I have vacation with my kids, it's sacred. No computer, no phones, and I make a point out of it. I sign out my email. I will not be answering mail for 3 weeks, period end. Nobody has died yet, and nobody will die either. So I think what you said, making time for yourself and making sure that when you make that time for yourself, it's your time. And then prioritizing what you want to spend that time and who you want to spend it with. And I think in the topic of kids, also having a great spouse that is supportive certainly helps, which I've been lucky.
Do you want to? Okay.
I don't have a personal life.
She works in television.
Neither do I anymore, so we're together. So here's another one. Actually, you can go first on this one. Any advice to women who are the only woman or in a vast minority at work?
Yes. Okay, so what works for me is humor. And I think even if you're a shy person, you kind of have to find that, because a lot of times when you're the only woman, you end up saying, I just said that a lot, because men are like repeating your ideas. They're not listening to you. And I think like our nature as women has been to like shrink and let that happen. But actually, I promise you, because I've done it, the world will not end if you say, I wasn't finished talking. And you have to like not get angry. If you show any emotion, then it turns into, crazy woman. You have to, and you can practice at home and like practice with your girlfriends, not getting emotional and just saying, I wasn't finished talking. Actually, I just said that. Oh, that's so funny. I just said that. And with any, like,
Can you come to faculty meeting
yes.
with me?
I wish that I could teach a class because I've gotten so good at it. And with any like individual or group, you're gonna have to do it 10 times. The 10th time you say, oh, I just said that, it's like magic and they start hearing your voice and you probably won't have to keep doing it. But you do, when it doesn't work the first time, don't give up. You just have to keep doing it. And eventually they get tired of being interrupted and they start pre-listening to you when you are actually talking. But it takes time and it takes like being even keeled the whole time.
Yeah. That's great.
Want to add anything to that?
I would say that I kind of like at some point, because I used to have to negotiate a lot of my job and negotiate deals and transactions and stuff. At some point it occurred to me like it was actually an advantage to be the only woman in the room. And like I'd come in and they'd be like, oh my God, this is not what we're used to. And how do we deal with it? And how do we negotiate with her? And you know, it was kind of funny. Like at some point I realized this is a big advantage. Like I can use this. And I got a lot more confident kind of, you know, using it to my advantage that I might be the only woman in the room and might throw something out that might seem like kind of a crazy idea or an interesting structure or something they hadn't thought of. And, you know, so it's good to kind of disrupt the status quo in that way. And once I figured that out, I think it became easier for me to be that person in the room. And I felt much more confident of like, not even sharing like my basic ideas, but like my most wild ideas, you know? And it's worked out pretty well, I have to say.
And so I have a story about coming out as gay, a very kind of personal, funny story. So my best friend on Wall Street was named Arlene. My dog, Arlene, who's very famous, is actually named after Arlene. And when I was, you know, finally coming forward, and this is like, I know now you all look at me as like, oh, all right, you're gay, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, 15, 20 years ago, that was a big deal. And I was working on Wall Street, and people weren't necessarily out then. I mean, we've made such tremendous progress on that as a country. But I told Arlene on a Friday, and Arlene is Irish Catholic and from Staten Island, so brought up in a certain way, and I was really worried about what she would think. And I said to Arlene, I have to tell you something on Monday. And so Monday morning, after morning meeting on Wall Street, she like pulls me aside. She's like, what? And I told her, and she said, oh, thank God, I thought something bad had happened. And you know, and it sort of was a lesson to me that what we hold in as being different. And we've made such progress on all fronts in acceptance. And I hope that continues despite what is happening in this country. But,
It will.
but own who you are with pride. Like I had worried for months about telling Arlene and what her reaction would be. And she just said to me, oh my God, I thought something was wrong. And I was telling myself something was wrong. And that's something for all of us, that we are all intersections of different things in this room. And we come to this world with who we are and be proud of that. So are there any questions within the room, or should I take some more from outside the room?
I just had a quick question.
Oh, we've got to get you the mic so other areas can hear it. So.
God, I'm crying. Thank you. Stuff. Wow. I'm obviously not a youngin', but here's my question, because I see kind of a lot of ennui, a lot of lack of involvement right now with young people. They feel overwhelmed. They feel powerless. You know, I'm an advisor at Morgan Stanley, and I see some of my clients who have lost their jobs in their 50s, and they don't really see a future anymore. And I think people are trying to be relevant right now, and they don't know how. And I just wanted you know, I'm not even sure what I'm asking here, but I just see so many people that are so frustrated and feel powerless. And you know, if I talk to young people, I just say, just vote. And they go, I don't like politics. I don't want to be involved. And I'm someone who is very vocal and very verbal, and I just want, you know, some advice on how to talk to people when they are feeling irrelevant, they're feeling powerless, they're feeling overwhelmed.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat the question for other rooms. So the question is, what should you do for other people who are feeling irrelevant and as if they don't have power or have a voice? Well, I'm going to add one thing, and that is that the world changed with social media. And you all have a voice. You can go on Twitter, you can go on Facebook, you can go on Instagram and say things. And you have to just be ready to acknowledge that people might be nasty back, and that's what the block button is for. But I think in many ways, social media is the great equalizer for women in having a voice and being able to be relevant. And even if you have 10 followers and you're saying something that you are passionate about, you're in the conversation and you are talking. And somebody's going to read that and think about something that you said a little differently after. So don't underestimate the importance of having your voice.
I hear the question as slightly different. I hear a little bit maybe about depression, frustration, burned out maybe when you're in a big company and there's all these pressures. I see it in our medical students and our fellows, etc. And I try to be very proactive in telling our residents and fellows that they need to take time for themselves. And I do advise them to volunteer in things outside work so that they have something outside work to also look forward to. And I find that sometimes that gives them a little strength, etc., to then come back to work on Monday and get back into that routine. I don't know. That's kind of how I interpret.
Yeah, I think very similarly, you have to find something that you can have achievements in. So if you feel like work is stagnant or your place in the world is stagnant, that can be really corrosive and you can feel really bad. But if you start like learning to play piano and on Wednesday you're like, oh my God, I finally figured out that scale or whatever, that sense of achievement can truly carry you through the week. So I think that like a lot of people are hurting so much right now and sort of don't know what to do. And activism is great. And if that's your thing, do that. But if that's not your thing, find a thing that you can take small steps at and achieve small achievements, and you'll feel, I promise you, like if you learn how to play the piano, you'll feel super powerful, or like whatever your version of that is.
A language.
Yeah, a language, go to the gym, you know, whatever it is for you that you can have a sense of achievement.
Yeah, I think about the political climate and all that, if you're depressed about that. And, you know, the cure is really action. And to engage in whatever issue, or maybe it's mentoring someone. But it is about doing something, like Ashley said, that will enrich yourself and other people. You know, there's a lot of foreign propagandists on social media right now. So, you know, don't, and their CEOs of those companies aren't handling it well, in my opinion. They're not being responsible. And so don't get bummed out about social media because there's lots of stuff on there that's not real.
And I was just, go ahead. I was just going to add, like, run towards, don't run away from.
Yeah.
Like, whatever it is you're doing, run towards. It's much more empowering to run and do things and put yourself out there than to isolate or to not do things. Showing up today is a really important thing that you've all done and will somehow change your life. So go to things, show up, have a voice, seek the world outward. So this kind of segues into this next question. Tell us about a mistake or failure and what you did next. I have a lot of mistakes and failures, but I'll let you all go.
Oh my God. You're looking at me.
Should we ask your daughter to leave?
I need to skip for a second. I'm thinking.
I was like, my biggest mistake was going to grad school. It was certainly my most expensive mistake, and the one I'll be literally paying for the rest of my life. And I think, I mean, this has come up, but I think you have to forgive yourself. You have to go, okay, where did I go wrong? I went to grad school. I made a choice out of fear instead of out of excitement or love or whatever. And sometimes your mistakes are really small and we beat ourselves up over those. Sometimes they're really big, like $100,000 mistakes, like going to grad school. And even if it's that big, at a certain point, you have to just forgive yourself and move on with life and go, I'm going to do better next time. And, you know, take in whatever feedback is useful. Don't take in the feedback that's not useful, and keep living life, because the biggest mistake you can make is to keep sitting in that mistake and not moving forward.
Yeah, I think the same thing. It's like, you know, I love my failures and my mistakes because they teach me. They, you know, like when things go well, you don't really learn anything.
Exactly. I think that's why I'm having a hard
Yeah,
time
I
thinking
mean,
about this.
I love every one of my
Yeah.
mistakes, and I
Yep.
make a million mistakes a day. You know, I have regrets, and I think my only like really regrets are personal regrets. You know, did I spend enough time with a family member before they passed away or something like that? That kind of stuff. It's like, did I spend enough personal time with people that I love? You know, those are the mistakes or the things that you go, God, I wish I hadn't. Maybe I'd spent a little more time or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, God, all my failures are just, they're awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and they make you who you are. I mean, I'm sorry about the debt, Ashley, but
It's like the most steady relationship I've ever been in.
Okay, well, as happens every year, we are running out of time. And I always look at my watch, I'm like, really? Where did that hour go? This is the fastest hour of your life, NGN Day. So we have time for one more question, if anyone in New York has a question, and then we're going to.
Thank you. Just as someone who is in sort of the middle career of my life, or my career life, I'm thinking about resilience a lot these days. And so wanted to ask the panel if they could share something which might be at the root of your resilience, because you've obviously had to encounter a lot of failure and challenges in your career. So I wanted to just maybe get a story or just some advice about what has contributed to your resilience.
Yeah, I can start off on that one because I have to look at my Twitter feed every day since November 2016 without looking back. And it's not like I'm looking at stuff I enjoy. I'm like, oh my God, I have to actually like keep looking. And I find that, and I especially learned this when I went on the book tour, the importance of having, like, understanding one thing that regrounds you. And for me, it's nature. And so the thing that I need to do to keep myself sane every day is take Shep and Arlene and go to the trail and just be, even if I'm looking at my phone because I have to keep up on the trail, just being in that actual setting. So I think for some people, Rose mentioned meditation. I'm like, you know, whatever that one thing is, going to the gym every day, find your one thing that allows you to connect with the earth again, or connect with yourself and be back to resting point. That's my thing.
This is so cheesy, but for me, it's the women in my life. Like, I have this amazing group of women of all ages who are like my core people. And if they say I'm doing okay, I know I'm doing okay. And when they say I veered off the path, I know I veered off the path. And whenever I'm scared, I have so many people I can call and be like, oh my God, I'm so scared. And like, you know who to call because you kind of know what answer you want. So I know, like, when I call one of my parents, I'm going to get, oh, honey, it's okay, take a break. And when I call the other parent, it's going to be, you finish that. You get that done. And the reason you called that person is because you really already had the answer and you knew what person was going to give you the answer. So it's kind of like trusting yourself and trusting the people around you who know you well enough to push you when you need to be pushed and to tell you sometimes when you need to step back and take a break.
I find a lot of strength in my patients because they're little people that are going through horrible challenges, illness, obviously. And anytime I feel that I have a problem, all I have to think is about my next patient, right? They have a bigger problem. So that keeps me a little grounded. Also, like you said, having a family that supports you, it's very important to me. And I also find a lot of inspiration from my 3 kids. You know, they're doing great things. They have a lot of energy, and I feel like then I need to keep up with them too. So, yeah, but I think going to the hospital every day, it's the biggest strength for me.
Gratitude is enriching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's not listening to the critics, you know, and you know, because there's a lot of people like to criticize each other and choices, and you know, I'm very good at tuning that out, you know, naturally. It's just, and I think that's been part of like how my resilience, and I think also like I've never really been afraid of taking risks. I just sort of feel like, what's the worst that can happen, if you take a risk? I mean, and so I think those two things together have made it a much, I have a lot of friends who they stress over every decision and they worry and they, and I don't spend a whole lot of time doing that. If I want to do something, I just try and go for it. And because you can get lost in that noise, that white noise, and it can really bring you down. That's why I think it's good to check in with yourself. Like, what do I want? What are my goals? I'm going to go get that thing,
So with that, we need to wrap it up. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. So just in terms of staying connected with us at the New Agenda, you're all here. You're all expected to come back next year. In 2019, it will be around June 4th, which is the day women got the right to vote in 1919. And also, for those of you who are interested in a topic that our foundation does, which is campus sexual assault, which under this administration, protections have been taken away from women coming forward. Our organization in October does races on college campuses around the country. You can participate in one, or you can host one either on your local college campus or in your community. And we will send you the T-shirts, and we use the proceeds of that to make educational material that we provide for the colleges to use for their incoming freshmen for free. So that's our Stop Run, Stop, Think, Protect Your Peers. That's our next big event coming in October before we see you again next year. And Kathleen Carroll from our advisory council is going to put down her Twitter phone for a second and just say first.
First off, I want to thank
Kathleen,
Yes,
take the
we have a
mic.
microphone.
First off, I want to thank all our panelists and Amy. It's been a great event. Thank you so much. And then Morgan Stanley, Carrie Fitzgerald, our financial advisor, who has provided the room again for this year. We greatly appreciate it. And all our other sponsors, you've been seeing them here, Real Capital Analytics, KPMG, Chameleon Resumes, and TalkPoint. Thank you so much. It's very important. So these companies have obviously made a commitment to the New Agenda, and we greatly appreciate that. And we also wanted to let you know that if you liked what you saw today and what is going on with the New Agenda, we would welcome your own support and donations. Any amount is fine, and special today, you will get a free tote for a $100 donation. And then you've seen the caps going around. That's a $50 donation. But any donation that you are comfortable with would be fantastic, either today or you do have with you in the sheets forms that you can fill in and mail back as well. So thank you again. This has been a great crowd and really awesome, Amy.
Thank you.
Amy.
We're turning off. Good networking, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you next year.